Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my Endless Diary Tales channel? Thank you so much. When my cousin handed me the borrowed college entrance exam materials, she teased me with a knowing look. Did you borrow this for Jack? You really go all out for him now that the college entrance exams are back. If he gets into a university, all your hard work will finally pay off. I smiled but said nothing. My cousin had guessed wrong. The books were for me, not him. Besides, there would be no sweetness in the days ahead with Jack, only endless suffering. But fortunately, I had no intention of staying with him anymore. I wouldn't have to starve myself every day to save food for him. I wouldn't need to endure the heat of summer and the chill of winter running a food stall just to support his studies, putting up with the sneers and ridicule of passers-by. In my previous life, Jack eventually achieved success. He became a university professor but despised me for being a street vendor, saying I embarrassed him in front of his prestigious colleagues. He even dumped his paralyzed mother on me. From now on, you stay home and take care of Mom. That way, no one can laugh at us, he ordered. I used the meager allowance he gave me to juggle everything. I prepared meals for his spoiled, demanding daughter while enduring the volatile temper of his mother, feeding her, helping her wash up, and tending to her every need. Exhausted, I often managed only a few bites of food for myself before collapsing into bed, repeating the cycle day after day. At the time, I didn't even know how much Jack earned. I often deprived myself just to make sure the family was provided for. On nights when the hunger became unbearable, I would sneak into the kitchen and gulp down cold water to numb my stomach. It wasn't until later that I discovered Jack had been hiding most of his salary, secretly giving it to Susan to fund her business ventures. Eventually, his mother passed away, and the daughter grew up. All I had left were chronic illnesses and a broken body. By then, Jack looked at me with even greater disdain. You don't understand my aspirations, he said coldly. You can't connect with my thoughts. A housewife like you has no common ground with someone like me. He clutched his head dramatically, claiming he'd had enough, as if he were the one who had suffered the most. Even our daughter chimed in. Mom, let Dad go. Can't you see that every day he spends with you is pure agony? Susan has been waiting for him all these years. Don't you think he deserves to spend the rest of his life in peace with her? Compared to me, a housewife who knew nothing, Susan, now a powerful businesswoman, could effortlessly gift him luxury cars and designer bags, take him to high-end venues, and introduce him to influential figures. But it had been me who taught him to speak word by word when he was just a toddler. It had been me who braved the stormy nights, carrying him to the hospital when he was burning with fever. In a fit of rage, I smashed everything in the house, screaming that I would never let these ingrates have a good life. Their gazes turned, cold as if they were looking at a lunatic. Soon after, Jack and our daughter simply moved into Susan's home when my stomach cancer flared up, leaving me vomiting blood on the floor. They were off vacationing together as a happy family, traveling to every scenic spot imaginable. Their photos flooded the internet. One a scholarly professor, the other a wealthy, elegant businesswoman. Everyone said they were a perfect match, so I decided to let Jack and Susan, the star-crossed lovers, have each other. I didn't want him anymore, and I certainly wouldn't give birth to that ungrateful child again. This time, I would walk a path without them. When I returned home, Jack was in the kitchen cooking noodles using the pound of refined flour I had exchanged for 10 pounds of coarse grain. He made soup with an egg base and fresh greens from my garden, preparing a fragrant bowl of noodle soup. Standing beside him, wearing a floral blouse, Susan cutely sniffled, fighting delicacy. When Susan coyly sniffed the air, she murmured softly, "It smells amazing, Jack. Your cooking is incredible. How wonderful it would be if I could eat your noodles every day." In the village, food was still rationed according to labor points. Both Susan and Jack were educated youth sent to the countryside. When Jack first arrived, he couldn't even dig the soil properly, and Susan was even worse. On her first day, she stubbed her toe and had to rest at the youth dormitory for half a month. During the harvest season, they received only a small portion of grain. Meals were scarce. They'd barely finish one before worrying about the next. Hunger made their eyes gleam with desperation. Even coarse grains that stuck painfully in their throats were swallowed down with effort. Then Jack saved me when I fell into the river. The sight of us embracing for warmth after the incident was seen by others, and rumors quickly spread through the village. He had no choice but to marry me. After we got married, our labor points increased, and Jack exchanged most of the coarse grains for refined white flour. Susan became a frequent visitor to our home. Jack smiled and said to her, "If you like it, feel free to come by more often. You don't eat much anyway." But when he glanced at me, his expression turned awkward, and he fell silent. Before, he always secretly shared food with Susan when I wasn't around. This was the first time I caught him red-handed. Susan, unfazed, looked at me innocently and said, "Oh, you're back, Mary. Jack made these noodles especially. Would you like some?" Her composure made her seem more like the mistress of the house than me. Of course, it was Jack who had given her this confidence and assurance. I sneered internally and said to Jack, "From now on, let's split our labor points and our food. You eat your share and I'll eat mine." Jack was used to taking advantage of me, knowing I would starve myself to ensure he had enough to eat, but this time I wasn't that foolish. Before Jack could respond, Susan's eyes welled up with tears. "Mary, don't blame Jack. It's my fault. Please don't argue with him because of me. I won't come here anymore crying." She ran out the door. Jack looked at me with disappointment etched on his face. "Do you really have to be so harsh? How did you become like this?" In the past, this tactic of his always worked on me. Back then, I was completely infatuated with him. Jack was an educated youth, tall, refined, and nothing like the sweaty, rough villager. If he hadn't saved me from drowning, we wouldn't have ended up together. My insecurities made me overly concerned with his opinion, treating him like a deity that I dared not displease. But now I simply gave him a cold, mocking smile. "Think whatever you want." Jack froze, stunned by the coldness in my eyes, and said nothing for a long while. I left him standing there, and went into the bedroom alone. A few minutes later, Jack walked past the door with a bowl in his hands, chasing after Susan. Of course, the noodles he made specifically for her had to be personally delivered. That was the only way he'd be satisfied. A wave of pain crashed through my chest. I thought that having lived a whole lifetime already, those old wounds would have been buried by time, but it wasn't that easy. The bitterness and resentment were etched deeply in my heart, scars that continually reminded me of my foolishness. I turned my gaze away and picked up the calendar. On the date of the college entrance exams, I drew a heavy circle. In my previous life, I could have taken the exam too. Although I grew up in the village, I had studied up to high school. When the exams were reinstated, I was already married to Jack, with no money and the family needing someone to support it. My dreams of further education were buried. The one who made all the sacrifices, of course, was me. By the time I finally managed to support Jack enough for him to succeed, when I tried to pick up my books again, our neglected daughter was crying her heart out beside me. Jack stormed out of the study with an irritated expression. "Do you even know how to be a mother?" he snapped. "How can you be so heartless and ignore your own child?" When I suggested he help out a little, he shot back, "If I don't work, how are we supposed to feed the family?" Step by step, I compromised until wrinkles began to creep into the corners of my eyes, and the years wore away my youth. On quiet, lonely nights, I would pick up the college entrance exam materials from that year and repeatedly go over them, as if doing so could fill the regret in my heart. Now heaven has given me another chance. This time, I won't let anyone stand in my way. I opened the books and silently counted down in my mind. Just one more month. All I needed was one more month. When Jack returned home that night, it was already late. Seeing the cold stove and empty kitchen, he seemed stunned. In the past, no matter how late he came back, there was always a hot meal waiting for him. It had only been a single day, and he was already unsettled when he noticed I had moved his belongings to the store. Age room, his steps faltered outside the door for a long while. Just as I was drifting off to sleep, I heard his voice, soft and hesitant. "What happened today was my fault, but you know Susan isn't an outsider. We both came here from the city as part of the same youth program. She's just a girl unfamiliar with the area. As her big brother, I naturally have to take care of her. She's used to eating refined food in the city and can't stomach horse grains. She's already lost weight. I couldn't just ignore her, right? Big brother, What an excuse. In my past life, this big brother ended up sharing a bed with his little sister. The room fell silent again, save for the sound of our breathing. After what felt like an eternity, Jack spoke again, his voice low and muffled. If it makes you unhappy, I won't let her come here for meals anymore. I turned over and pretended not to hear him. I knew that no matter what he said, it wouldn't matter. As long as Susan shed a few tears in front of him and pleaded softly, Jack would forget all his so-called principles. I had long grown accustomed to it. In the days that followed, I kept up my normal routine, using every spare moment to study. Jack, who had planned to focus on his own preparations for the college entrance exams, found himself struggling. After I insisted we divide our food supplies, he had to start going out to the fields daily, hoe in hand, to maintain his farm and ensure there was enough refined flour to keep providing for Susan. Rumors began to spread in the village. People gossiped that I was deliberately hoarding white bread at home, trying to trap Jack, so he couldn't take the exams and would have to stay stuck in the countryside with me. In the past, it wasn't uncommon for educated youth and local village girls to form families, but as soon as the men found a way back to the city, they'd abandon their wives and children without a second thought. Once back in the city, they had no trouble finding new wives. When someone asked Jack about it, he was evasive, refusing to give a clear answer, which only made the rumors more believable. By the time I heard about it, 5 days had passed. An older neighbor woman looked at me with approval. You've got your head screwed on straight, girl. A man needs to be kept in check. What's the use of university or books? If he gets too successful, he'll just fly away. I knew she wasn't defending me. She was here for the drama. In their eyes, a village girl like me wasn't good enough for someone like Jack, a city boy. Naturally, they assumed I'd go to any lengths to tie him down. The thought made me sick to my stomach. Just as I was about to respond, a voice called out from behind me. Sis. When I turned my head, I saw Jang walking toward me, carrying a large sack of grain, his body drenched in sweat. After stepping inside, he patted the sack with a grin and let out a couple of sheepish laughs. If you want white flour, just tell me. From now on, you can eat as much as you want. It's an important time right now. Let your brother-in-law stay home and focus on studying. If he gets into college, he can take you to the city and you'll finally live a good life. My mom passed away when I was 5 years old, and Jang was only 2. Not long after, my dad remarried. While he tried his best to look after us, growing up under a stepmother's care was never easy, especially after my dad had more children with her. I didn't know how Jang had managed to get his hands on the grain, but looking at his thin, bamboo-like frame at an age when he should have been thriving made my eyes well up. Jang frowned and asked, Sis, what's going on? Did Jack bully you? Tell me and I'll take care of him. In my previous life, after I moved to the city, my life was in complete disarray. When Jang visited, he had been living a tough life in the countryside, weathered and worn. But when he saw me eating a bowl of plain white rice with some pickled vegetables, his eyes turned red. He shoved the only 200-some yuan he had left into my hand. When I ran after him, he was already in his 30s, but he hunched over and ran away as fast as he could, as if afraid I might catch him. In that household, I was the kind of mother and wife who wasn't allowed a single word of complaint, merely a shadow in Jack's life, an uneducated village girl with no prospects. It had been a long time since I'd felt such unconditional care. I smiled and said, I'm fine, Jang. Everything is going well. But before I knew it, tears were streaming down my face. I made up some excuse to send him on his way, though I knew he didn't believe me. Still, I couldn't let him carry any more of my burdens. Later that evening, Jack came back from the fields. When he saw the pile of grain on the floor, his face lit up for a moment before turning awkward. Your family came by, I sneered. Yeah, they heard the rumors about how I'm forcing my husband to work himself to death for white flour, and were worried I'd be drowned in everyone's spit. Jack's face flushed red. Mary, I know I've let you down, but don't drag Susan into this. She's a city girl. She can't handle gossip like this. I'm just worried something might happen to her. He didn't finish, but I knew exactly what he meant. Back then, when our daughter suddenly came down with a high fever and needed to be hospitalized, I had already spent all the money we had to keep the household running. In the end, we had to borrow money from one of Jack's colleagues to pay for her treatment. His colleague had been puzzled. "Professor Jack, your salary isn't low. How do you not even have enough for an emergency like this?" Jack didn't dare admit that he'd given most of his money to Susan. Instead, he blamed me, saying, "I hand over my entire paycheck to my wife. Who knows how she squandered it all?" By the time I found out, I already had a reputation in Jack's circle as a wasteful, selfish woman. Everyone sympathized with him for having married someone like me. Even our neighbors took his side, complaining about how unfortunate he was. One of them once said, "Mary, I know you're not very. You indulge yourself every day, eating and drinking whatever you want, while poor Professor Jack is wearing a suit so worn it's fraying at the edges. If you keep this up, one day he'll realize he doesn't want you anymore, and then you'll regret it when it's too late." Furious, I confronted Jack about why he was treating me this way. Instead of apologizing, he responded self-righteously, "So what if people say a few things about you? You're just a housewife. You don't go out much anyway. Susan is different. She's out there running a business, and reputation is everything. We can't let gossip affect her." Time may have rewound, but Jack was still the same Jack. He hadn't changed. I didn't want to waste another word on him. As I turned to leave, he grabbed my arm, his expression tense. "Mary, can you promise not to talk to Susan about any of this? She's sensitive, you know." "I swear, once I pass the college entrance exam and we move back to the city, I won't deal with her anymore. It'll just be the two of us living a good life together." It felt like a saw was cutting through my heart, tearing it apart piece by piece. The buried resentment I had thought was long gone resurfaced. I wanted to shout, just like I had in my previous life, and ask him why. Why did he treat me this way? Why was only Susan's dignity worth protecting while mine meant nothing? But I lowered my eyes and forced down all my emotions. Some things, no matter how many times you say them, won't change. People who pretend to be asleep will never wake up. My lips curled into a cold smile, and I replied, "Don't worry, I won't trouble her." I turned and went back to my room, staring at the bold date circled on the calendar. I told myself, "Mary, you don't have much longer to endure. Just 20 more days and you'll be free." Not only would I keep up this facade, but I'd ensure the charade continued uninterrupted. Jack believed he had plenty of time ahead of him, but he didn't know that this would be his only chance to take the college entrance exam. Once he returned to the city, his lazy freeloading brothers would have already taken over the family's house and job prospects, and his harsh, selfish mother wouldn't support his education. Instead, she drained him dry to feed her other sons. With no money, no home, and no job, and with Susan constantly depending on him, where would Jack find the energy to take another exam? But none of that mattered to me anymore. The exam date drew closer each day, and I didn't want to waste another second on him. Perhaps out of guilt, Jack didn't visit Susan in the days that followed. Even the food he used to bring her was now delivered by other educated youth. He started leaving early and coming home late, and one day he even brought back a nest of bird eggs. I remembered when we were newlyweds. He had once brought me bird eggs from the forest just like this. Back then, I boiled them and shared them with him. One for him and one for me. We had eaten them with sweet smiles, savoring every bite. But now the sight of the eggs made me nauseous. Did he think I was so easily pacified that a slap followed by a sweet treat could make everything better? The first person to break under the strain wasn't Jack, it was Susan. One day, while I was gathering firewood in the hills, she blocked my path. Susan was wearing a pale pink blouse, the slightly open collar revealing her fair, delicate neck. She stood there like a budding flower in the wood, completely out of place in the countryside and worlds apart from someone like me, a woman who had grown up rooted in the soil. She noticed my distracted gaze, and a hint of pride flashed in her eyes. "Looks good, right? Jack used ration coupons to get this fabric for me," Susan said smugly, as if expecting me to be furious. But I wasn't. Jack had given her far more than just money. He had provided her with startup capital for her business, connected her with influential people, and paved her way. In the past, I had tossed and turned through sleepless nights, consumed by anger and countless arguments with him. But over time, I grew tired of fighting, and eventually, I stopped caring. As I turned to leave, Susan blocked my way again. Mary, she sneered. Do you think Jack would have ever looked at you if you hadn't deliberately fallen into the river and tricked him into saving you? Jack doesn't belong to you, and he certainly doesn't belong in this backwater village. He has so many dreams and ambitions. Once he gets into college and sees the broader world outside, do you really think you'll still be worthy of him? These were the same words Susan had thrown at me in my past life. Back then, she was sitting in a luxury car, looking at me with disdain as I walked home from the market with groceries. Jack only married you to have someone bear his children and take care of his family. You're no different from a nanny. But his love and money, those are all mine. At the time, her words had stabbed into my heart like a knife, but now they only made me laugh coldly. Have you said enough? I asked, my tone icy. If you liked him so much, why didn't you get together with him before we got married? Back then, Susan had been cozying up to the village chief's son, hoping to use their connections to find a way back to the city. When the college entrance exams were reinstated, she realized she hadn't put any effort into studying and couldn't pass on her own. That's when she turned her attention back to Jack. Susan's face twisted in an odd expression before she suddenly dropped to her knees with a loud thud. Tears streamed from her eyes. Sis-in-law, I promise I'll stay away from Jack from now on. Please, I'm begging you, don't report this to the commune. It would ruin him. Before I could make sense of her strange behavior, she suddenly shoved me hard. I lost my footing and tumbled down the slope, scattering the firewood I had been carrying. My ankle was scraped by a piece of wood, and blood began to drip steadily from the wound. But before I could react, a figure rushed past me, running straight toward Susan. When I finally steadied myself and looked up, I saw Jack holding Susan, who was covered in dirt but otherwise unharmed, in his arms. His gaze was icy as he turned to me. I've told you before, if you're angry, take it out on me. Why do you have to make trouble for someone who has nothing to do with this? Someone who has nothing to do with this? I asked coldly, pulling up my torn pant leg to reveal my bleeding wound. Are your eyes blind? Do people who harm others usually end up injuring themselves like this? Jack's gaze flicked to the blood pooling around my ankle, and his expression faltered briefly. But then Susan, with tears streaming down her face, tugged on his sleeve pitifully. Jack, she sobbed. It's my fault. Let's just say I caused this. I was scared she'd report us to the commune. If you get a blemish on your record, you won't be able to take the college entrance exam. She cried harder and collapsed dramatically into Jack's arms. And he believed her, or maybe he just wanted an excuse to justify his already biased feelings. He cast me a cold glance before turning and carrying Susan away. Watching their retreating figures, I unclenched my fists, letting the numb coldness in my heart dissipate little by little. It didn't matter. There were only 10 days left. I could endure this to comfort the overly distraught Susan. Jack didn't return home until very late that night. From then on, he seemed to have found a reason to justify meeting with Susan repeatedly, even at night. I didn't know what they were doing outside, nor did I care. Lying in bed, I kept replaying the lessons I had reviewed during the day. This younger body was truly remarkable. In my previous life, as I aged, I couldn't retain anything, no matter how many times I read it. But now, the material seemed to blend effortlessly into my mind, giving me a sense of peace. However, even as I drifted into sleep, an inexplicable unease lingered in my heart, as though I had forgotten something important. That unease became clear when I was jolted awake in the middle of the night by a loud crash. I suddenly remembered that in my previous life, around this time, there had been a heavy rainstorm. The house Jack and I lived in had been provided by the village for the educated youth. It was old and poorly maintained. During that storm, the house couldn't withstand the downpour and collapsed. Back then, Jack and I weren't home when it happened, but this time I wasn't so lucky. Large raindrops pelted my face and body as a deafening thunderclap split the sky. Lightning illuminated the collapsed roof tiles and the fallen beams around me. Looking at the precarious state of the house, I shivered. Braving the rain, I groped my way through the darkness. Heaven had given me a second chance, and I hadn't yet taken the college entrance exams or built a better life for Jang and me. I couldn't die here. But just as I thought this, the weakened wall beside me gave way under the relentless rain. collapsing and pinning my lower body beneath the heavy debris. The debris and the weight of the soil felt like an anchor dragging me down. I struggled and screamed for help, but the torrential rain drowned out my voice. I was suddenly overwhelmed with bitterness. Why had Haven given me this second chance only to put me through this torment? I hated Jack. If he hadn't gone to see Susan, I wouldn't be in this situation. But more than anything, I hated myself for being so consumed with preparing for the exams that I had forgotten something so critical. The rain continued to pour, draining all the warmth from my body. Just as I was about to lose consciousness, I heard someone calling my name loudly. With great effort, I opened my eyes and saw Jang in the rain, frantically digging at the soil with his bare hands, crying and laughing at the same time. "Sis, don't fall asleep. I'll get you out soon," he shouted. "Someone help. My sister is trapped. Here, come and help." His cries brought my father and more villagers to the scene. Together, they worked to free me. When I was finally lifted onto an open patch of ground, someone suddenly remembered. "Wait, wasn't Jack in sight too? Is he still trapped under the rubble? Quick, look for him." But they didn't need to search for long. Jack stood in the crowd, holding an umbrella over Susan. The sudden commotion had drawn most of the village to the scene. Some held torches, others carried kerosene lamps, lighting up the open area. Amidst the brightly lit gathering, Jack stood there, seemingly unaffected. When his gaze landed on me, his expression changed, and the umbrella slipped from his hand as he rushed toward me. But Jang was faster. He delivered a swift kick that sent Jack sprawling into the mud and water. Without hesitation, Jang pinned him down and punched him repeatedly. "You bastard," he roared. "When my sister was in danger, where were you? Tell me, where exactly were you? Do you even realize she almost died just now?" Jang roared at Jack, his voice trembling with anger. Susan let out a sharp scream, trying to pull Jang away, but he swung his hand back and slapped her hard across the face. "You shameless woman. I've had enough of you. You sit here every day eating the white bread my brother-in-law sends you, and yet you still cling to my sister. How low do you have to stoop to feel satisfied stealing someone else's man?" Jack's appearance in the middle of the night with Susan, leaving me behind, had already struck the villagers as suspicious. Jang's outburst only added fuel to the fire. "I told you there was something fishy about those two," one person said. "I've seen Jack sneaking food to Susan more than once. When I confronted him, he even had the nerve to say Mary told him to do it," another added. "Tisk, men from the city are unreliable. They've got wives but can't keep their eyes to themselves," someone else muttered. "And that Susan is no better. She knows he's married but still cozies up to him. This is what city manners are like." The villagers' voices grew louder, each accusation sharper than the last. Susan, red-faced and wide-eyed, looked distressed. Desperately at Jack, who was still lying on the ground, stunned. Jack finally began to move, struggling to his feet. "Jang, let me go. I need to check on your sister." But Susan, overwhelmed by the villagers' scorn, burst into sobs, clutching her face, and ran off into the darkness. The rain poured harder. My father glanced at my pale face and called out to Jang, stopping him before he could strike Jack again. Jang delivered one last punch, knocking Jack back into the mud. "Don't think my sister is easy to bully. I'm letting you off easy this time, but if you dare pull this again, I'll kill you." As we began to leave, the crowd gradually dispersed, leaving Jack lying motionless in the rain-soaked dirt in the pitch-black night. The distance between Jack and me grew with each step, just like in my previous life. After I got married, my place in my family's home was gone. The village chief could only arrange for me to stay in a small storage room they had hastily cleaned out. My father, seeing that I was settled, left under my stepmother's impatient urging. Everything that had happened today felt like a whirlwind. I stared blankly at the barren walls of the room, until I suddenly remembered the textbooks I had left behind in the muddy water. Startled, I jumped to my feet, but Jang stopped me, holding out a bundle. "Sis, is this what you're looking for?" I took it from him, and upon seeing the intact books inside, couldn't stop the tears of relief from streaming down my face. "Thank goodness," I murmured. Jang looked at me and asked hesitantly, "Sis, are you planning to take the college entrance exam?" I didn't know when he had figured it out or how much he knew about Jack and Susan. As his sister, I felt like I had failed him in so many ways. Bitterly I nodded. Jang then asked, "And him? What about Jack?" "Jang, I'm going to divorce him," I said firmly. His eyes widened in shock, and for a long time he didn't say anything. I knew he was willing to stand up for me, to beat Jack to a pulp, even force him to apologize. But divorce? He had never considered that. In this era, divorce carried a heavy stigma. Even if Jack was at fault, I would be the one branded with shame simply because I was a woman. He was about to say something when a sudden knock on the door interrupted us. Jang's muffled voice came from outside. "Mary, are you there?" "It's me." I noticed a flash of anger in Jang's eyes, but I stopped him. "I'll handle this," I said. Some things needed to be addressed, and I'd held back my words for far too long. Standing at the doorway, Jack was soaked from head to toe, his face bruised and swollen from Jang's punches. Despite his disheveled appearance, he looked at me with concern. "Mary, are you hurt? Are you okay?" he asked, his voice filled with genuine worry, but his concern only felt like a cruel joke to me. I couldn't see what purpose his words served now. "I'm fine," I said coldly. "Jack, let me get a divorce." A flash of lightning lit up the sky, freezing the shocked expression on his face. His lips trembled as he tried to speak. "Mary, I know. You're angry. What happened today was my fault. I shouldn't have been away when you were in danger. I'll change. I promise I won't ever let something like this happen again." I had no patience left to argue with him. I cut straight to the point. "And what about Susan? Are you just going to leave your dear little sister behind?" My voice was sharp. "How long are you going to keep pretending your divided affections are nothing more than a brother's concern for his sister? How much longer will you deceive yourself?" My words seemed to strike a nerve. His lips quivered and he stammered, "It's not like that. I only looked after Susan because she needed help. I've already sent a letter to my family. I told them I'd bring you back to the city with me. I've made up my mind. I want to spend the rest of my life with you." "Is that so?" I replied, my tone icy. "Well, I don't care anymore." Jack's expression faltered, and a sense of defeat flickered in his eyes. He forced a weak smile. "It's okay," he said softly. "I'll wait for you to change your mind. We have so much time ahead of us. I'll make you forgive me." I didn't respond. Instead, I quietly closed the door in his hopeful face. Only 3 days left. Soon I would embark on a new life, a life without Jack. There was nothing more to say between us. On the day of the college entrance exam, Jang woke up early to see me off at the exam site. I saw Jack standing near the entrance, and beside him was Susan. She seemed to be talking to him, but he looked distracted. When he saw us, his eyes lit up. Jack quickly approached me, his tone soft and ingratiating. "Mary, are you here to wish me luck? Don't worry, I'll do my best on the exam. Once we're back in the city, I'll make sure you have a good life." Before I could reply, John cut in coldly, "You're delusional." I explained that I was there to take the exam beside Jack. Susan let out a loud, disdainful laugh, her face full of scorn. To her, the college entrance exam was a privilege for people like them, and someone like me, a simple village girl, had no right to be part of it. Jack seemed equally surprised. It was almost funny. Even Jang had known I was preparing for the exam, but Jack, who lived with me day in and day out, hadn't noticed a thing. He opened his mouth to say something, but the bell signaling the start of the exam cut him off. I walked past him with the crowd, leaving him far behind. This exam was something I had dreamed about for a lifetime. At this moment, I wanted to pour every ounce of focus into it. Jack and Susan no longer mattered. They were completely forgotten. As I stepped into the exam hall, the 3-day exam flew by. After it ended, I didn't return to the village. Instead, I went to the neighboring town where my cousin ran a small clothing shop. She had heard I wanted to save money and offered me a job. Each day, I woke up at dawn to clean the shop, organize the merchandise, and greet customers with a smile as they came in and left. My time here was so fulfilling that I hardly noticed how quickly the days passed. Jang burst into the shop, panting heavily. His excitement was palpable as he grabbed my hands. "Sis, you did it. You got into college." My heart leaped into my throat. With trembling hands, I took the acceptance letter, the very thing I had dreamed of in my past life. Tears streamed down my face before I even realized I was crying. Finally, I had escaped the fate of my previous life. From this moment on, I would walk a new path. As he wiped away my tears, Jang couldn't hide his smugness. Sis, you don't know yet, do you? You're the only one from the village who got into college, apart from one other educated youth. Jack and Susan didn't pass. It's hilarious. They were acting so self-assured before, and now they're just a joke. I wasn't surprised. Jack was intelligent, but he had spent all his time recently wrapped up in his drama with Susan, leaving no room to focus on studying. As for Susan, she hadn't passed in our previous life either. CLE, I asked, did you take care of what I asked you to do? Jang had originally been against my decision to divorce Jack, but over time I had proven to him that I could live just fine without Jack. And now I had even been accepted into college. He raised an eyebrow. It's done. I read the divorce agreement you wrote aloud to Jack in front of the village chief. Sis, you should have seen his face. It was like he'd been struck by lightning. He went pale as a sheet and said he wouldn't agree to it. He claimed he'd wait for you forever. Dee sneered. If he's so broken-hearted now, why didn't he act better before? It's pathetic. I chuckled indifferently. Whatever Jack said or did now couldn't affect me in the slightest. To me, he was just a stranger, a passerby with no connection to my life. From this point forward, our lives would never intersect again. The last time I saw Jack was 6 years later. By then I had graduated, been assigned a stable job, and had a new fiancé. That day, Jang came to the provincial capital and invited us out for a meal. Since I had gone to college, I had brought him along with me to the city. In this era, opportunities for business were everywhere. Initially, I taught Jang how to set up a small stall outside the school gates. As the business grew, he started learning from others and began sourcing goods wholesale from Guangzhou to sell. Over time, his business flourished, and he eventually bought a house and a car. When I saw him again after many years, he was dressed sharply in a suit, carrying himself with confidence and charisma. He looked even more polished and successful than most city folks. That evening, we had just finished a meal at a restaurant and were stepping outside when, not far away, I noticed a street vendor stooped over, using his hands to create sugar paintings for children. His hunched back and limp were unmistakable. When he saw me, a flicker of panic crossed his face. Without a second thought, he abandoned the money on the table, pushed his cart, and limped away as fast as he could. It was Jack, 6 years after our last meeting. Over the years, I had heard bits and pieces about him, mostly because Jang, still harboring a grudge, would occasionally dig around for news about him. I knew that after returning to the city, Jack had married Susan. He had planned to take the college entrance exam again, but his family had no money, and there was no one foolish enough to support him like I once had. After struggling for a long time, he finally resigned himself to his fate. Unable to find a proper job, he started a street vending business. But Susan, used to a life of comfort, couldn't handle the hard work. She had wanted a good life with Jack, not one where she had to wake up early and stay out late running a stall. One day, she used Jack's name to scam someone out of a large sum of money, then abandoned him and their newborn daughter, fleeing on her own. When the creditors couldn't find her, they broke one of Jack's legs and stationed themselves outside his home, demanding repayment. From that point on, Jack's life became what it was now. John glanced at Jack's pitiful state and let out a sarcastic chuckle. My fiancé, noticing the scene, asked curiously, "Who is that? Why did he run away when he saw us?" I withdrew my gaze and replied calmly, "Just someone unimportant. Don't worry about him. Let's go."